Hey everyone, Coach Mark here, and before I dive into today's topic, make sure to find me over on Instagram as Coach Mark Estrabio. Also, I offer one-to-one coaching. It's what I do full-time and the odds are very good. I'd love to work with you. With that being said, let's get into it. In today's video, I'm going to be talking a bit about what my own training is looking like right now. This is actually going to be part of a series. What I'm going to do here is in today's video, this is the first one, I'm just going to talk a bit about the situation report, what my goals are currently, and what my training is going to look like. And then after that, over the next 4 videos, I'll break down each individual day of my training. If you previously watched my Conjugate 201 video where I discussed some of the principles I use in my iteration of Conjugate, consider this the Conjugate 202 where I expand a little bit more and you can see more of a practical application of how I go about getting the cat a conjugate, in this case adapting it to my individual needs. Now, as far as my individual needs go and the customization of a program, the first thing we always want to do is take a look at the person behind the program, take a look at the lifter. I know for myself, if I'm being very honest, past couple of years I have not been the most focused in my own training, not as locked in as I used to be. I've made some good progress, I've hit some milestones including a 315 bench as well as a 635 deadlift, and also right now I find myself more interested in focusing in on my squat, bench, and deadlift. We're going to blame that on the fact that I announce at powerlifting competitions, but I also do want to build a base to help me get back into the sport of strongman competitively. So ultimately we're looking at a big 3 base plus developmental work to support the events, so upper back work, a log strict press, do some sort of loading type work as well as conditioning. That way, when it comes time to prep for a show, the best version of me is the one getting jammed into the square peg. Because when it comes to competing, it's one of those things where you have to force yourself to adapt to the show, whereas in the off season, you're building the best possible you. Now that we've discussed where I'm at, let's talk a little bit about where I want to go. Over the next 12 to 16 weeks, I'm looking to get to a 475 or greater high bar Olympic style back squat, not necessarily having to go ass to grass, but at least getting parallel that way would pass competition standards. Now the reason why I'm opting for a high bar instead of a low bar squat is specifically tied to the second and third goals here with the bench and deadlift. What I find is when I squat with the low bar quite a bit, it really beats up my shoulders as well as my low back. So I'll sacrifice a little poundage on the squat to use high bar. That way there's more of me in reserve and less beat up when it comes to the other 2 lifts. And the bench, I want to get that to 335 or so. And it's one of those things where I'm not looking to bounce it off my sternum, but I'm not necessarily needing it to be a powerlifting style paused bench, but ultimately I'd like to build to that point. And then the deadlift, I want to get that to about 650 or so. And then after that, I want to have about a 225 Viper press, and that's the log 1 motion. And the reason why the inclusion of the Viper press is it's a really great overhead variation that challenges you in hip and shoulder extension, which if you look at the positions mandated by the sport of strongman, such as a loading event, there's a lot of hip and shoulder extension involved in there, as well as a lot of upper back demand. So the Viper helps me stay in tune with the needs of those loading events, but also helps me build my press, which historically was a weak point for me as a strongman athlete when I was more competitive. And bear in mind, this is about a 12 to 16 week time frame that I'm looking at right now. So with that being a consideration, it's going to be one of those things where some of these I might hit sooner, some I might not hit within that 12 to 16 weeks. But having a goal with some sort of time frame is going to be really important for me, because now that I know where I am, I know where I want to go, let's talk about what the impediments to getting there just might be. In terms of considerations, the first thing I want to talk about is going to be upper back and arm development. This is what's going to help stabilize and support bigger pressing numbers. With how long my arms are, it's very easy for me to put too much strain into my shoulders pressing, which is the last thing I want to do. So by beefing up the arms, that's that middle of the suspension bridge between the implement and my shoulder. Stronger cables in the suspension bridge, obviously it's a more stable and secure bridge, so arm strength will be a priority for me. Plus, who doesn't want bigger arms? Now, as far as the squat goes, it's pretty undertrained. It's not a movement I've put a ton of time and energy into past couple years. So what that means for me, though, luckily, is I'm going to be able to milk a lot of gains out of it very quickly, just in terms of getting more efficient with it, developing my skill. So it won't be overcomplicated. Now, as far as the deadlift goes, I know for myself, my deadlift peaks very quickly. And it's one of those things that if I start doing a lot of low rep sets, my strength will skyrocket quickly, but then it falls off just as fast. So I'm going to focus a bit more on the 5 to 8 rep range on the interim. And the reason for this is this will allow me to build a wide base of strength and muscularity. Then towards the tail end of this 12 to 16 week phase, I can start integrating in stuff like triples, doubles, and singles to help really extract and show the strength that I built in the higher rep phases. And then lastly, the log press is going to be trained after the deadlift. And the reason why is the deadlift itself doesn't generate much low back fatigue for me, whereas the log does quite a bit due to the angles involved, the center of gravity. And again, if I think about how far away it is from me in between my femurs, my arms, it's a long range of motion from ground to overhead for me. It's one of those things where if I were prepping for a show, sure, I'd have to do log before the deadlift because that's usually how the show flow goes. But in training, I'm going to give myself the best survivable opportunity by doing log after deadlift. And then I'll be doing quite a bit of back work throughout the week to help strengthen the thing up. So then when it does come time for peak phase, comes time for show prep, I'm more resilient and able to handle those loads. That way the show is less strenuous for me to prep for. Now, putting this all together, here's what a week might look like. Day 1 will be lower intensive, so I'm going to do some sort of deadlift variation, do a heavy 5 to 8, some sort of squat variation, a bent over barbell row with leg drive, glute ham raises, and core work. Then it's upper developmental rather than upper intensive, specifically because I have the log on this day, where I'm going to do a bench press, the Viper press, chin-up work, a tricep bicep superset, and then some sort of rear delt and upper back work. Then lower developmental, I'm going to do my primary high bar squat, a deadlift stance good morning to pins, split squats, back extension, and then landmine rotations. Now, the landmine rotation is particularly valuable for me. Reason being, when done correctly, it really helps improve your torso strength. And I have a fairly long torso, so by improving my torso strength, I'm less likely to fold over on the squat. In turn, that's also going to help me hold a better position for the log. Stronger torso, stronger upper back means my low back is going to bear less strain from the log down the road, plus back extensions to actually just make the low back stronger. And then last but not least is the upper intensive day. This is my last training day of the week. And in general, I find for me on Fridays, I like my workouts to be a little bit faster. Mentally, I just kind of want to get it done and want to go home, want to have my weekend, right? So I'm going to do a bench variation of some sort, an overhead press variation of some sort. Currently, I'm going to do a wide grip behind the neck lat pull down just to help open up my shoulders, train the upper back, and then a tricep bicep superset, and then another tricep bicep superset just to get a lot more arm volume in here. And then I'll have the weekend as well as Monday for my arms to recover before going into the upper developmental day. That way I don't have sore arms when I'm trying to do my competition or primary bench as well as the Viper press. Now, as far as my needs assessment from earlier, you can think of these as the 4 answers and how I'm answering those needs. The upper back is trained every day in this program, plus a day for dedicated arm work. Isolations for bicep and triceps has 3 total slots throughout the week, so that's 9 potential sets for each of them, on top of all the pressing and pulling volume, so that's quite a bit of work for the arms and upper back. The squat gets to be trained 2 times a week, so I can milk frequency a little while here, while also helping to push intensity. Not too much volume, and part of that is just because I find for myself high volume squatting coupled with heavy deadlifting, I tend to fall apart. But this will allow me to slowly ramp up the volume, and since I am squatting 2 times a week, I'll be able to develop my skill more quickly so then I can exploit volume down the road. It's one of those things you don't really want to train super high volume if your technique is bad, right? Now, as far as the deadlift goes, I'm going to use variations. This is going to help limit my load while still building strength. So movements such as a deficit deadlift is what I'm working on right now. As my deadlift is disproportionately strong, I want to limit maximal load there. That way I'm not over fatiguing myself throughout the training week. The back stimulus, quite a bit throughout the week, obviously. I've got vertical pulls being done after my vertical pressing work to help decompress my low back. As I alluded to earlier, vertical pressing tends to fatigue my low back more than squatting and deadlifting does, so this just acts as a bit of a tonic. And this is in addition to doing a lot of heavy back extension work via the good mornings as well as back extensions, especially that SSB deadlift stance good morning to pins. That is an amazing back builder, and it's also going to help build my torso strength, much like the landmine rotations. Plus, I've got the barbell row in there to help build a strong, resilient upper back, and that's just a good all-around back developer. And I know for myself, my barbell row is very weak relative to my deadlift, for example. So I've just got a lot of opportunities via accessory work to help build my main lifts. Because my deadlift is so far ahead, I can use predictor, big accessory movements to help build the foundation there, which means less overall load. So then my body has more resources to adapt and help me improve on the movements such as squat, bench, and the Viper press. So this was a really quick video today. I mainly just wanted to talk a bit about the overview of what my next training phase is going to look like. And then what I'm going to do over the next 4 weeks is each week I'm going to do a video on the individual day where I talk a bit more in depth on how I'm going about training that day using conjugate training principles as well as discussing movement selection. As I said, really quick one today. It's kind of my first video back in between the holidays, family, this and that. You know how life gets sometimes. So thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully you found something useful out of this. If you have any questions, please ask them down below in the comments section. I love a quality question, and who knows, they might just get their own video to help answer them. Anyways, folks, hope you're having a great one, and I'll see you next time.